Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So as you might have seen in the title, today I'm going to be talking about the 10 signs that you might have ADHD if you're in high school. So this is the beginning of a series that I'm going to do on different environments. So for example, high school, university, and relationships, all the 10 signs for each of those environments that you might have ADHD. So if you're interested, then stick around and let's get on with the video. The first sign you might have ADHD is if you've never really done your homework. That doesn't really apply to high school only, but it's kind of like your whole school life. If you've never really sat down and done your homework ever, then that might be a sign that you have ADHD. I never saw not doing my homework as a kind of difference because a lot of students don't actually, sit down every night and feel really motivated to do their homework. But when it becomes a pattern and day-to-day thing, when you actually never do them, you become very good at improvising, which I was extremely good at. And I developed this skill because of never being prepared. I would do my homework last minute in class if I really needed to do them, or I would simply forget about them or procrastinate, which I will talk about in another point in this video. I want to make a disclaimer there because I'm not doing this video so that I can diagnose you. I'm not a medical expert, so of course take my advice with a grain of salt. Okay, so the second sign you might have ADHD is if you keep on forgetting your books, assignments, anything really that you need to bring from home to class or from class to home. Our attention span is quite small and we can be distracted by a lot of things. So for example, when the teacher says, don't forget to bring your math textbook the next day, we were looking at something else through the window, we forgot to write it down, and the next day we come back to class and we don't have the textbook. We need to sit next to somebody who has it, or then we get punished for it, which happened to me like a lot of times. If you keep on forgetting those small things that everyone brings with them all the time, then there's a chance that you might have ADHD. The third sign that you might have ADHD is if you constantly feel like you're lost and you're trying to catch up, but you really can't. It's hard to describe this feeling, but whenever I was in high school and I had homework to do, essays to write, I always felt like I didn't get the memo on how to do homework and how to sit down and write an essay. I felt like everyone else got it and knew how to organize themselves, plan ahead, and I was just there not knowing what to do. You always feel kind of lost and like it's very blurry. Anytime you need to do some homework, you feel like everyone else has more instructions than you do and it seems easy for them and it seems really hard for you. So that's the third sign. If you feel like you're lost and forever behind everyone else, then that might be a sign that you have ADHD. Okay, I'm back. I closed my window because I realized how much noise it was making, so I'm really sorry about this. Okay, so sign number 4 is if you come home and do everything you possibly can except doing your homework when you need to do homework, which was basically every night for me. Whenever I would come home, I would go watch TV and then I would make myself some snacks and then I would check my phone and then I would go upstairs and play the guitar and then I would feel like, oh, I need to organize my drawers, so I would organize my drawers, and then I would see a paper that would remind me of something that I read a while ago, so I would go get that book, and then I would think, oh, why don't I make cookies right now? So if you can see where I'm going with this, I just mean that we would do anything to not do the important stuff, and because we're so easily distracted and interested in so many things, I could never do one thing and finish it. I would always jump from one thing to the other, and when I had homework to do, this was even more flagrant. I would just go all into this process of just jumping from one thing to the other because it was so much more stimulating than actually sitting down and doing my homework, which, as you might know, for someone with ADHD is extremely boring, and we don't tolerate boring. It doesn't compute well with our brains. I was just trying to constantly stimulate my brain without actually knowing it, and I realized that I was switching tasks a lot more often than my peers. Some of them obviously didn't really do them homework a lot because, homework is boring for everyone a lot of the time, but they still managed to do it when they needed to. But I, on the contrary, was really struggling. It was a really toxic cycle because I would always end up making something which wasn't top quality because I would do it like not even last minute. I would do it past the deadline. It was a nightmare every time, and the cycle started again when I had another assignment that was due. Sign number 5 is something that I mentioned at least 4 times since the beginning of this video. So basically for every sign, I think I mentioned procrastination, which is, I think, the most important word for students with ADHD. Procrastination for someone with ADHD is not the same as procrastination for anyone else. People tend to confuse someone normal who doesn't want to do homework and who procrastinates until the deadline and someone with ADHD who actually has immense mental struggle to sit down and do something difficult like writing an essay. When I had to write essays, I would procrastinate extremely to the point where, as I said before, I would not hand in my essay until a month later than the original deadline. And I know very few people in my year that would do the same, and potentially they might have ADHD themselves. If you procrastinate to the point where even the pressure of a deadline doesn't make you start something, and you feel the pressure accumulating, and every day is a cycle of self-loathing because you can't get to work but you don't know how to get to work, and it's all like a big rock on your chest that you don't know how to get rid of. That might be a huge sign, and probably the most important sign that you might have ADHD and you need to get help, because if you don't know how your brain works, it's very hard to get out of this negative cycle that I was in during my probably actually all years of high school. And it really affected me a lot, especially in regards to my peers, because obviously they started noticing that I wasn't handing in my work when I needed to. They started thinking I was just lazy and ego-centered. It really hurt to be viewed that way, even though I knew it wasn't that. I was just really struggling, but I wasn't able to voice my struggle. The fifth sign, procrastinating on difficult tasks to an extreme, is probably the most important point you should retain from this video. Okay, so the sixth point is actually quite funny. If you have ADHD, you're probably falling asleep a lot in class. For someone with ADHD, you need to be quite stimulated in order to keep your attention on something. If you're in a class that is super boring to you, you might just feel like you're dozing off and you don't really know why, because you've had enough sleep the night before and you're wondering like, why is my brain simply shutting off without my permission? I had that a lot, and I found this again when I was at uni and I was reading research papers that were really boring, as in non-stimulating, because it's a lot of words, it's complicated. I would just like fall asleep in front of my paper. That's the thing, if you keep fighting it and you constantly fall asleep in those classes that you're not really interested in, it's not normal, and not everyone does this. So yeah, that's sign number 6. Sign number 7, before it goes completely dark, is that you are overactive in classes that you like and underactive in classes that you dislike. Classes where you are bored will make you sleepy, inactive, completely out of it, and when you're actually really interested in the topic, you will be raising your hand all the time, talking, having conversation with the teacher, being like the goody student, always answering questions, etc. Philosophy, French, languages, English, for me, it was all a very stimulating environment and I really enjoyed it. Obviously it depended on what we were looking at on that particular day, and sometimes I was more or less interested, but overall I had those classes where I was really into it. And then math, for example, was my worst class ever. I would never participate. I would always get asked questions and not know how to answer them. I was constantly behind. I was falling asleep. I was having very bad grades. And that's another thing that's related to this, is that if you have ADHD, you probably have very good grades in some areas and very bad grades in other areas. Whereas most of the students usually have some kind of average. Obviously, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, but for someone with ADHD, it's quite a stark difference. If you notice those differences in the classes you follow and your grades, then that might be a sign. Okay, so sign number 8 that you might have ADHD is if you can't keep your notes binders organized. This seems very simple, and I know a lot of people are disorganized, and that doesn't necessarily mean they have ADHD, but it's usually linked. If you notice yourself trying hard to be organized, have a neat handwriting, but always failing to do so, I noticed that whenever I try to organize my thinking on a piece of paper, I would always struggle to make it really neat and tidy, and it would go all over the place. And when I try to organize my notes, I would just lose them, and I wasn't able to have like a successful organization system. You always dream and want very beautiful, consistent notes, color-coded, etc., and you always fail to keep it up. It was really frustrating overall. One thing is that they would always be incomplete. I would always have some pages missing. It was never consistent, and that's also a big part of ADHD. If you find yourself being super inconsistent at school, then then that might be a huge sign that you have ADHD. Number 9 is if you find it excruciatingly painful to sit down for a whole hour, you will find it very difficult to remain focused and seated during the whole class. You will want at some point to get a break, and usually for me, as I mentioned in my previous video, after 25 minutes, I'm most likely to be waiting for that break and needing to recharge my batteries. What that can look like is if you constantly try to get up to do something. I would constantly try to get up to go to the bathroom, or I would want to throw something in a bin. Unconsciously, I was just trying to get up and move my body, so I found a lot of reasons to do so. So number 10 is forgetfulness and lack of clarity over the content that you've learned. I tended to forget a lot of what I had learned in the previous days and previous weeks, and I had a lot of trouble being clear about the totality of what I had learned. So for example, in essays, I've really struggled to put everything together. It would take me a lot of mental effort to reconstruct everything, and I figured that it was the same for everyone else, but I noticed while talking to my friends that it seemed very easy for them and quite hard for me. I guess that aspect of forgetfulness and lack of clarity was really something linked to ADHD. So here you go, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I hope you can send this to a friend who might benefit from it. Subscribe to my channel below if you want to see more videos like this. This is a series, so I'll be getting more of them out. The next one will probably be about university, so 10 signs you might have ADHD as a university student. Stay tuned if you're interested in this, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!